New York was finally having a normal night. Cars moved in steady lines. People walked dogs. A street musician played under a bridge, and nobody screamed. Superman floated high above it all, just under the clouds. He listened the way he always did. Not to spy, not to control, just to be ready. A child laughed from a rooftop party. A bus driver sang along to the radio. A woman's heartbeat slowed as she fell asleep. Then a new sound cut through everything. It was not a scream. It was a thin, sharp tone, like a clean note played on glass. Clark turned his head. He saw a crane on the far side of the river. The metal arm had snapped. It was falling toward a half-built tower. Men in hard hats ran, but they were too slow. Clark was already moving. He hit the air like a bullet. He caught the crane arm with both hands, stopped it in mid-drop, and lowered it, as if it weighed nothing. He set it down with care, slow enough that no one was pulled off their feet by the sudden stop. A worker stared up at him with wide eyes. Did you just... Clark smiled once. You're safe. Please get everyone away from the edge. He rose again. Fast. Quiet. He did not stay to be thanked. That thin tone came back. This time, the sky itself flickered, just for a heartbeat, like the world blinked. Clark's stomach tightened. He had felt that kind of wrongness before, during the convergence. The memory tasted like cold metal in his mouth. A silver shape fell out of the flicker. It was small, about the size of a backpack. It had no wings, but it hovered perfectly. It had no face, but it turned as if it could see him. Clark slowed and held his hands open. He did not want to scare it into firing first. The drone tilted, and a beam of soft blue light swept over him from head to toe. Clark felt it measure his body heat, his breath, the speed of his heart. Then, from somewhere inside the drone, a voice played. Not a person's voice, a clean machine voice. Specimen located. Clark's eyes narrowed. Who sent you? The drone did not answer the question. It simply rose and tried to move past him, toward the city. Clark moved in front of it again. It stopped. Then the drone's surface split into tiny plates, like scales shifting. A new lens opened. It flashed red for half a second. Clark's skin prickled. His muscles felt heavier. Not weak, just slowed, like someone had poured thick syrup into the air. He did not panic. He adapted. He shot forward anyway and hit the drone with a hard, clean punch. The drone shattered. Pieces spun away like glittering scraps. Clark reached out to catch the biggest piece, then stopped. Because the scraps were not falling. They were crawling. Tiny metal parts twisted and pulled themselves across the air, inch by inch, trying to regroup, trying to escape. Okay, a voice said from below, loud enough to reach Clark. That is officially the creepiest thing I've seen this week. Spider-Man swung up on a web line and hovered on the side of a building, sticking to the glass. Clark looked down. Peter, get people away from the street. Those pieces could... Yeah, no, I'm on it. Also, can I web a robot that's trying to do the crab walk in midair? Yes. Peter fired webs. White lines snapped out and tangled several pieces at once, pinning them to the building. More pieces tried to slip away. Clark moved like a blur and clapped his hands together, not to smash, but to compress. The air pressure caught the smaller scraps and shoved them inward. He grabbed them and squeezed until they stopped moving. Peter stared. You just air-clapped robot confetti. Clark did not smile this time. His eyes stayed on the last piece, which still tried to crawl. This was not random. This was not a normal alien scout. This was a hunter. A circular glow opened in the air behind Clark. A portal. The orange light painted the clouds. Dr. Strange stepped through, his cloak moving on its own like a watchful animal. He looked at the pinned metal scraps. Then he looked at Clark's face. His expression turned hard. "This is not from our universe," Strange said. "And it came looking for you." Clark held the last piece in his fist, careful not to crush any evidence. He stared at it as if it might speak again. In the distance, far above the clouds, a faint red blink pulsed in low orbit. Quick. Hidden. Almost easy to miss. But Clark felt it. And somewhere deep in him, a new fear formed a simple question. How many more are coming? The next morning, Avengers headquarters did not feel like a home. It felt like a lab. Not cold. Not cruel. Just sharp and busy. Full of people who had learned the hard way that trust was not enough. Clark sat at a long table. The metal scraps were sealed inside a clear case with glowing lines around it. Tony Stark stood on the other side, arms crossed, staring like the case had insulted him personally. Peter stood nearby, trying to act calm and failing. His foot tapped without stopping. Dr. Strange paced in a small circle, hands behind his back, like he was watching the floor for cracks. A screen lit up with Shuri's face from Wakanda. She wore goggles on her forehead, and a grin that did not fully hide her focus. "Okay," Shuri said. "I want to be clear. This is rude technology." Tony pointed at the case. "It's also smug technology." Peter raised a hand. It tried to crawl away. "That's like super smug." Tony shot him a look. "Thank you for the emotional support, kid." Clark leaned forward. "What is it?" Tony tapped his wrist. A hologram rose above the case, showing layers inside the drone scraps. There were patterns like circuits, but also something else. Tiny symbols that looked almost like language. "It's not any tech I've seen from here," Tony said. "Not Kree, not Shi'ar, not anything I have on file." Strange stopped pacing. "The symbols are not just code. They're a map." Shuri nodded. "Yes, a map made from energy math." "Strange. I hate that you're right." Peter blinked. "Energy math can be a map?" "Everything can be a map," Tony said, "if you know what you're looking at." Strange lifted one hand and made a small gesture. The air shimmered. A thin line of light appeared over the hologram, tracing a pattern. "These shapes match the same kind of damage the Convergence left," Strange said. Clark's jaw tightened at the word. Convergence. The last time the sky had blinked, worlds had almost torn apart. He still remembered the sound, the pressure in his bones, the feeling that reality itself was tired of holding together. He had promised himself he would not let that happen again. Tony glanced at Clark. His voice softened a fraction. "We think that night left scars," Tony said, "like cracks in a windshield." Shuri leaned closer to her camera. "And this drone found the cracks. It followed them." Peter whispered. "So it sniffed the universe." Tony pointed at him. "Stop making it worse with your words." Peter shrugged. "Sorry, but also, yeah, it sniffed the universe." Clark sat back. "It called me specimen." Strange's eyes narrowed. "That means whoever built it does not see you as a person." Tony's mouth tightened. "Which means I'm already in a bad mood." A door opened. Steve Rogers walked in, calm as always. He carried a folder, but he did not look at it. He looked at Clark. "Morning," Steve said. Clark stood. "Steve." Steve looked at the case and then at Tony. "Report." Tony gave the short version, like he was trying not to throw something. Steve listened without interrupting. When Tony finished, Steve's eyes returned to Clark. "You okay?" Steve asked. Clark paused. Then he told the truth in the simplest way. "I'm worried," he said. "Not for me, for everyone." Steve nodded like that made perfect sense. "Then we treat it as everyone's problem." Tony made a small sound. "That is very Captain America of you." Steve gave him a dry look. "And you're about to say we need a plan." "We need a plan," Tony said instantly. Clark held up a hand. "If your plan is a cage, don't." Tony's face tightened, then relaxed. He took a breath like he was choosing his words with care. "No cages," Tony said. "Not that. I learned that lesson. The hard way." Clark studied him. He heard the truth in Tony's heartbeat. Fast, controlled, real. Tony continued, "But I'm not doing nothing. If there's a hunter coming, we set alarms. We set sensors. We set a way to know before we're on fire." Shuri smiled. "Finally, a man who speaks my language." Steve looked at Clark again. "We don't own you," Steve said, "but we do protect people. And you do too." Clark nodded once. "Then we do it together." Strange stepped forward. "There's another problem," he said. "The cracks. The scars. If someone can use them like roads, they can also widen them." Peter swallowed. "So the sky can blink again." "Yes," Strange said. "And next time it may not blink. It may break." The room went quiet. Clark's hands clenched under the table. He forced them open again. He did not want to look like a storm. Tony broke the silence with a new hologram. It displayed an official-looking page with many lines of text. "While we're here," Tony said, with fake cheer, "the Interreality Compact has sent over something very fun." Peter leaned in. "Is that a form?" Tony pointed at the top. "It's a whole stack of forms." Steve frowned. "Why?" Tony scrolled. "Because apparently the words alien and legal identity cause people to lose their minds." Clark stared at the screen. The title read, "Interreality Visitor Registration and Compliance Packet." Under it were boxes for name, origin, species, powers, and acceptable containment options. Clark's eyes narrowed. Tony lifted both hands quickly. "Not my idea. Not my work. I'm just the messenger." Peter raised a hand again. "Is there a box for super nice guy who saves buses?" Tony pointed at him. "Yes." Under comments. Shuri laughed out loud. Clark did not. He reached out and slid the hologram away. "I will not sign anything that treats me like an object," he said. Steve's voice stayed steady. "You shouldn't." Tony nodded slowly. "Agreed." Strange's eyes flicked toward the window, toward the sky. "Forms won't matter if the next visitor arrives with a bottle for the planet." Tony tapped the drone case. "So we figure out who built this. We figure out how it tracked the scars. And we figure out why it targeted Clark." Peter tried to lighten the mood. "Because he's handsome?" Tony stared at him. "Because he's loud in the universe, kid." Clark looked up. "I didn't come here to be loud." Steve's gaze held his. "You came here to save lives." Clark nodded. "Yes." Tony's voice turned sharper again, focused. "Then we do the only thing we can do. We get ahead of it." Shuri's eyes glinted. "I want samples. I want radiation readings. I want to see if that red flash in orbit is connected." Clark's head tilted. "You saw it?" Shuri pointed at her screen. "Wakanda sees many things." Tony's eyebrows rose. "Okay, that's mildly terrifying. Thank you." Strange said, "If there is a red pulse, it may not be cosmic. It may be human." Clark's stomach tightened again. He remembered the last story, the last fight, the last time Ross had tried to turn control into safety. He did not say the name yet, but he felt it like a shadow on the back of his neck. Across the country, in a secure room with thick walls and no windows, Thaddeus Ross watched footage of Superman catching the crane and fighting the drone. He did not watch it like a man admiring a hero. He watched it like a man studying a storm. A scientist beside him spoke carefully. "Sir, the Compact Council is pushing for transparency." Ross did not look away from the screen. "Transparency," he repeated, like the word was sour. "Yes, sir. They want audits. Oversight." Ross finally turned. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard. "They took my satellites," he said quietly. "They called it justice." The scientist swallowed. "Sir, after the convergence..." Ross slammed a fist on the table. Not wild, controlled, still loud. "After the convergence, I did what I had to do," Ross said, "and they humiliated me for it." He leaned forward. His voice dropped. "Now, the universe is sending hunters," he said. "And you want me to ask permission to defend my planet?" The scientist hesitated. The red spectrum network was dangerous. Ross's mouth curled into something that was not a smile. "Then we build it better." A second screen came alive. It showed a small satellite prototype. Not a wide net like before. Something more focused, more precise. A label appeared on the corner. Project Red Dawn. Phase 1. Ross's eyes stayed locked on it. "We will not chain him," Ross said, as if he were being reasonable. "We will not cage him." The scientist let out a breath. Ross continued, softer and colder. "We will simply make sure he can't decide the world by himself." He looked back to the first screen, where Superman hovered in the sky like a bright sign. "And if the next threat is worse than him," Ross said, "then we will have a tool that works on anything that flies too close to the sun." The scientist's voice shook. "Sir, what about the risk of attracting something? If the convergence scars..." Ross's eyes narrowed. "Then let them come," he said. "Let them see that Earth is not helpless." He turned away. And in low orbit, hidden among normal satellites, a tiny red light blinked once. 2 days later, Clark tried to do something he had not done in a while. He tried to be Clark Kent. Tony had insisted on it in the most annoying way possible. "You need a life," Tony had said, "like a real one, not just floating and being sad." Clark had stared at him. "I don't float and be sad." Tony had smirked. "Sure." So Clark walked into a city office building with a borrowed jacket and glasses that fooled nobody who knew what to look for, but fooled enough people who were busy with their own problems. He stood in line like a normal person. A woman behind the desk looked up. "Next." Clark stepped forward. "Hi, I need to register a legal identity," she typed. "Name?" "Clark Kent," she typed again. Then her screen flashed red. Her smile froze. I'm sorry. It says you don't exist." Clark blinked. "That can't be right." She tried again. It's very right. "It says your file is blank." Clark gave a polite smile. "Could we create a file?" She clicked a button. The computer beeped. Then it beeped again, louder, like it was offended. She leaned closer. "It says, origin, unknown, category, interreality visitor. Please contact..." The printer beside her suddenly started spitting pages like it had lost control. Clark looked down. The pages were forms. So many forms. He sighed. Outside, Tony waited in sunglasses, leaning on a car like he was pretending to be casual and failing. Clark walked out holding the stack. "Your world really likes paper," Clark said. Tony grinned. "It's how we fight monsters, with paperwork." Clark held up a page. "This one asks for acceptable containment options." Tony winced. "Okay, that one is not funny." Clark's voice stayed calm, but there was steel under it. "I will not be contained." Tony nodded once. "Then don't be. We'll do it the other way." Clark tilted his head. "What other way?" Tony tapped his temple. "Trust. Boundaries. Systems that warn us of danger without treating you like danger." Clark looked at the city. People moved around them. Kids ran. Someone shouted at a taxi. Life kept going. "I can do boundaries," Clark said. "I've done them my whole life." Tony's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face changed. "Strange just felt something," Tony said. Clark's eyes sharpened. "Where?" "Everywhere," Tony said. He says the scars lit up for a second. Clark felt it too, like a distant itch behind his ribs. And far away, in deep space, something else felt it. Something cold, something patient. A mind that did not dream. A mind that collected. It began with silence. Across the planet, cameras caught small silver shapes appearing high in the air. Not from portals like Strange used. Not from ships that tore the sky. They simply showed up, as if reality forgot to say no. One above Tokyo. One above Lagos. One above London. One above New York. Then more. Dozens. Hundreds. Each one hovered and scanned. Then, as if they shared one thought, they moved. They did not rush into crowds. They did not shoot at random. They went for power stations, communication towers, data centers, and government buildings. They went for the nervous system of the world. Inside Avengers HQ, alarms sang. Friday's voice filled the air. Multiple unidentified aerial objects detected globally. Pattern suggests coordinated reconnaissance. Tony's hands moved fast across a console. Yeah, that's not good. Steve entered already in uniform, shield on his arm. Report. Tony didn't look up. Someone is mapping the planet like it's a grocery list. Peter swung into the room half-dressed. Please tell me we're not getting invaded on a school day. Steve's tone stayed calm. Stay with the team. You're not going alone. Peter swallowed and nodded. Strange appeared in a burst of sparks. His face was tight. They are using the scars, he said. Not tearing them, touching them. Like they know where they are. Clark arrived a second later, the air still moving around him. How many? He asked. Tony finally looked up. Enough. Clark's eyes went distant. His hearing stretched across the city. He heard the small, high whine of the drones. He heard people noticing them, pointing, shouting. He heard fear growing. I'm going, Clark said. Steve stepped closer. We go together. Thor's voice boomed from the doorway as he entered, lightning humming around him. Aye. Let the metal insects learn that Midgard bites back. Natasha appeared behind him, quiet as a shadow. We need a central target. Find the leader. These aren't acting on their own. Tony's fingers paused. There, he said, pointing at a map display. They're all converging on one place. A red circle formed on the screen. Geneva, a summit. Leaders, diplomats, cameras, global networks. Clark's stomach dropped. They're going to make a message. Steve nodded. Then we stop it. The Quinjet launched within minutes. Over the Atlantic, Clark flew ahead, faster than sound, leaving the jet behind like it was standing still. As he flew, he felt it again. A faint red pulse. Not from the drones. From above. From orbit. His muscles did not fail him. He was still Superman. But his body noticed the signal, the way it noticed poison in the air. He clenched his teeth and kept moving. On the ground in Geneva, the summit hall was a bright building of glass and stone. People inside were supposed to talk about peace, trade, and climate. Instead, they looked up as the sky filled with silver dots. Security forces shouted orders. People ran. Cameras rolled anyway because the world never stops filming. The first drone descended like a judge. It projected a beam onto the building, and a grid of light formed over the walls, measuring every angle. Then more beams. A circle began to draw itself in the air above the summit hall. Not a portal. A machine field. A cage shape. Clark hit the scene like a meteor without the crash. He landed on the plaza, knees bent, and the stone cracked under his boots. Every head turned. People pointed. People cried. People cheered. People cursed. Clark didn't look at them long. He looked up at the drones. Not here, he said softly. He launched upward. He smashed through the first wave, hands moving faster than cameras could follow. He grabbed drones, crushed them, and threw the pieces out over empty fields. But these drones were different from the first one. They learned. They adjusted their distance. They began to move in patterns that tried to box him in. Clark didn't chase everyone. He focused on the building. The circle above the summit hall tightened. The air inside it shimmered as if the space itself was being squeezed. Clark heard screams from inside. He dove toward the building, and the drones reacted. A red flash pulsed from several of them at once. Clark felt his chest tighten. His vision blurred for half a heartbeat. It wasn't kryptonite. It wasn't pain like poison. It was like the sun itself had dimmed. His strength did not vanish, but it dipped just enough to matter. He corrected mid-flight and still slammed into the edge of the field. The force rippled through it. The field bent but did not break. Tony's voice crackled in Clark's ear. "Okay, that red flash, that is not normal. That is targeted." Clark grunted as he pushed. "It feels like red sun," Tony finished, grim. Which is real bad news because that means someone did their homework. Steve's jet arrived and streaked over the plaza. Thor came down like thunder, slamming Mjolnir into the ground. Lightning burst upward in a wide arc and fried a dozen drones at once. Natasha sprinted toward the building, dodging falling metal. She fired grapples and pulled civilians out through side exits, fast and controlled. Peter swung overhead, webs snapping out to catch debris and yank people out of danger. "I hate metal bugs," he shouted, then immediately added, "No offense, Thor." Thor didn't even look at him. "None taken, little spider." Strange opened portals in quick flashes, pulling panicked people out of the summit hall in groups. His face was pale with effort, but his hand stayed steady. Clark pushed harder on the field. It pushed back. Inside, the building creaked, as if it were being folded into a smaller space. Tony's voice rose, sharp. "Clark, don't brute force it if it's a compression field. You might make it snap inward." Clark froze for a fraction of a second, then pulled back, eyes scanning. He forced himself to think like a rescuer, not a battering ram. "Strange," Clark said. "Can you disrupt one point? Just enough for air to leak?" Strange's jaw tightened. "It is not magic," he said, "but it acts like a spell. It has rules. I can argue with the rules." "Do it," Steve said. "We'll cover you." Thor leapt into the sky and spun Mjolnir, creating a storm around the drones. The lightning forced them to spread out to avoid getting cooked. Peter used the gaps to web clusters together and slam them into each other. "Group project," he yelled, then winced. "Bad joke. Sorry." Natasha made it to a side entrance and pulled a diplomat out by the collar, then pushed him toward Strange's portal. "Move," she ordered. Tony arrived in full armor, rocketing above the plaza. He fired precise blasts, not wild ones, hitting drones at the joints, breaking their stabilizers. "These things are made like they expect to be hit," Tony muttered. Then the air above the summit hall warped. A new shape formed. Not a drone. A larger machine unfolded like a flower made of metal. It hovered dead center above the field. And it spoke. Not with sound at first, with text on every screen in the area. Phones, cameras, billboards. One sentence. Earth. Cataloged. Then another. Kal-El. Required. Clark's blood went cold at the name. Tony's eyes widened behind his helmet. "Okay, that's specific." Steve's voice stayed steady. "Clark, stay focused." Clark's gaze locked on the larger machine. It wasn't yelling. It wasn't angry. It was sure. Clark flew straight at it. The machine reacted instantly, as if it had predicted his line. Red pulses flickered in a tight pattern, not to blast him away, but to slow his timing, to make him misjudge by inches. Clark adjusted again. He twisted, rolled, and came up behind it, trying to grab its core. The machine split in half. Clark's hands closed on empty air. The two halves rejoined behind him and fired a beam. Not red, but clear and bright, straight into the field below. The compression circle tightened sharply. People screamed inside. Clark's heart jumped. He shot down and caught the building's main support beam with one hand through the wall, holding it steady so it would not snap under the stress. He could feel the field trying to shrink the space, trying to take the building like a toy. "Tony!" Clark shouted. "What is this thing doing?" Tony's scanners ran wild. "It's trying to bottle the area," Tony said. "Not destroy it. Contain it." "Bottling?" Peter repeated, voice high. Like a snow globe?" Strange's eyes narrowed. "A prison," he said. "A collection." Thor's face darkened. "Coward's magic," he growled. Clark's mind clicked. A collector. A mind that wanted things intact. A mind that wanted him intact. Clark did not waste time trying to understand why. He focused on saving the people first. "Strange," Clark said, voice tight. "How many can you pull out?" "As many as my hands can hold steady," Strange snapped. "Which is not enough if this closes fully." Steve's voice cut in. "We need to break the source. Thor, Iron Man, hit the core." Tony's repulsors charged. "Working on it." Thor rocketed upward and hurled Mjolnir straight into the center machine. The machine caught it. Not with hands, with a field. Mjolnir stopped in midair, shaking, lightning snapping across a barrier that refused to yield. Thor's eyes widened in anger. "It dares!" He yanked, but the field held. Tony fired at the field edges, trying to find a weak spot. Natasha watched from the ground, eyes scanning. "It's not holding the hammer to show off," she said. "It's learning. It's testing how worthy physics works." Tony's voice tightened. "That is the least fun science experiment." Clark held the building steady with one hand and looked up at the machine. He made a choice. He would not win this by punching. He would win it by changing the problem. He shot upward, leaving the building supported by momentum and careful timing. He reached the machine in a flash and did not strike it. He grabbed it, both hands around the core. He flew straight up, dragging it away from the compression field. The machine fought back with red pulses, trying to slow him, trying to make him drop it. Clark's muscles burned, not in pain, in effort. He kept going. Higher. Far enough that if it exploded, it would not hit the city. Tony flew beside him, keeping distance. "Clark, if that thing is tied to the field, moving it might loosen it," Clark said through clenched teeth. "Or it might collapse it. But if it collapses, without it feeding it." Strange shouted from below. "I feel it weakening." The circle over the summit hall flickered. For a second, air rushed in like the building had been underwater. Strange used the opening and threw portals like lifelines, pulling out the last trapped people in quick waves. Peter swung through and carried 2 civilians at once, one under each arm, face strained. "I'm not a bus," he yelled, then coughed. "Okay, I'm kind of a bus." The field snapped. Not inward, outward. It shattered like glass made of light. The building groaned but stayed standing. Clark did not celebrate. He was still holding the core machine above the clouds, and it was still trying to fight him with that red pattern. Tony's eyes narrowed. "It's building a new pulse," Tony said. Thor's voice came through comms, furious. "Release my hammer, foul thing!" Clark looked at the machine and spoke as if it could understand. "You're not taking anyone." The machine's voice finally came through, not from screens, but from itself. "Collection requires preservation," it said. Then it did something worse than attack. It opened. A round container unfolded from its side like a clean jar. Inside it, space looked wrong. Smaller, curved, a bottle, and it aimed downward. Clark's eyes widened. No. He slammed the machine's container shut with brute force. Metal screamed. The core shuddered. Tony fired a focused blast into a seam Clark had exposed. "There!" Tony shouted. "That's the joint!" Thor's hammer suddenly ripped free, flying back to him like an angry comet. Thor caught it and hurled it again, this time at the exposed seam. Mjolnir struck. Lightning exploded. The machine cracked open in a burst of white sparks. Clark flung the broken core away into empty sky, then dove back down. He hit the plaza seconds later. People were alive. The building stood. The world was still in one piece, but the drones were not all destroyed. Some were already retreating, pulling away in neat lines, like soldiers following an order. Tony hovered low, smoke curling from one shoulder plate. "They got what they wanted," he said quietly. Steve looked at him. "What?" Tony's eyes tracked the retreating drones. "Data, scans, patterns." Strange's face tightened. "And a path. They proved the scars can be used." Peter's voice was small. "So they'll come back." Clark stared at the sky where the drones vanished. His hands clenched. He felt the red pulse again, faint but real, like a distant heartbeat that didn't belong. Somewhere, someone on Earth was echoing that same red energy. And somewhere far away, the mind behind the drones was now sure of one thing. Superman could stop it, which meant Superman had to be captured. On a screen inside a dark, silent ship beyond the edge of the solar system, Geneva replayed in perfect detail. Not like a video, like a model. Every motion plotted, every choice tagged. A cold voice spoke into the quiet. Earth response, adequate. A pause. Kal-El response, optimal. Another pause. Countermeasures, red spectrum effective. Then a final line, spoken like a simple fact. Collection will proceed. Back on Earth, Clark landed beside Steve, Tony, and Strange. He looked at all of them. His voice was calm, but there was iron in it. "They used my name," he said. "They know me." Tony nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "And now we know something too." "What?" Steve asked. Tony's eyes hardened. "This isn't a random invasion." Strange's cloak shifted as if it agreed. "This is a hunt," Strange said. Clark looked up at the clouds again. He did not look afraid. He looked ready. "Then we don't wait," Clark said. "We find the hunter first." And far above them, hidden among ordinary satellites, a small red light blinked once more. The world did what it always did after a disaster. It argued. Clark stood on a quiet rooftop in Geneva, just far enough away that no one could reach him. The summit building still stood. Its glass walls were cracked in places. Emergency lights flashed. Ambulances came and went like ants in a line. Above it all, drones were gone. But the fear they left behind was still here. Clark listened to the city. He heard people crying into phones. He heard a man laughing too loudly because he was alive. He heard a security officer telling a shaken diplomat again and again, "It's over. It's over." Clark knew better than to believe that. A screen on a nearby building showed a news replay. The words kept looping. Earth. Cataloged. Kal-El. Required. The anchor's voice shook when she said his name, like it meant the sky could fall just because a stranger had spoken it. Clark's hands tightened into fists, then opened again. He did not like being the center of a world's panic. He did not like being the reason people wrote new laws out of fear. He thought of Metropolis. He thought of the first time Lex Luthor had looked at him like a problem to solve. He exhaled slow. Footsteps crunched behind him. Steve Rogers stepped up to the edge of the roof, shield on his back, hair damp from the mist in the air. His face was tired in a quiet way, but steady. "You did good," Steve said. Clark did not look away from the city. "People still got hurt," Steve nodded. "That's true." Clark's jaw flexed. "They used red spectrum pulses. That shouldn't be." Here. Steve glanced at him. You think it came from Earth? I know what it feels like, Clark said. It's not random. Steve rested his hands on the ledge. Then we find out who's doing it. Clark finally looked at him. And what if the answer is someone the world trusts? Steve held his gaze. Then we tell the truth anyway. Clark's chest eased a little at that. That was Steve. Simple, clear, and stubborn about the right thing. A soft flicker opened in the air. Dr. Strange's portal formed like a ring of sparks. Both of you, Strange called, sharp. Now. Clark and Steve stepped through. Avengers headquarters buzzed like a shaken hive. Screens showed maps of the world. Dots marked drone sightings. Lines traced retreat paths. Numbers ran in the corners, updating every second. Tony stood in the center of it all, arms moving as he talked, his face half lit by data. Natasha sat at a workstation, eyes narrowed as she watched footage in slow motion, over and over. Peter stood too close to the main screen, like staring hard could make it less scary. Thor leaned against a pillar, spinning his hammer once every few seconds. He looked bored, but Clark could smell the anger on him like heat. Strange walked in last, cloak sweeping behind him, and the room quieted for a beat. Tony pointed at a highlighted cluster on the display. They didn't just hit Geneva, he said. They touched the planet. Soft, quick, like a doctor tapping your knee to see if you kick. Peter swallowed. So we kicked. Tony shot him a look. We kicked, and now the doctor knows what our reflexes look like. Steve stepped forward. Any idea where they went? Tony tapped a new screen. A projection of deep space appeared. If I had to guess, somewhere not local. But they left us a gift. Natasha paused her video and zoomed in on the big machine Clark had hauled into the sky. On the frame where it spoke, a tiny symbol flashed for less than a second. Look, Natasha said. Tony leaned close. That's not a brand. That's a signature. Strange's eyes tightened. A mind. Thor's voice was low. Name it. Tony hesitated. I don't have a clean name. Clark did. The way it tried to preserve the building. The way it tried to bottle space. The cold logic. The need to collect. He had seen it in old data from Kryptonian archives. Warnings passed down like ghost stories. Brainiac, Clark said. Everyone looked at him. Peter blinked. Brainy. What? A collector, Clark said. A conqueror. He doesn't burn worlds first. He studies them. He keeps pieces. Sometimes cities. Thor's grip tightened on Mjolnir. A thief of worlds. Strange stepped closer. If he found the scars, he can find them again. Tony's jaw tightened. And he's already building counters. Red spectrum pulses, targeted timing disruption, compression fields. Steve watched Tony. That last part. The red spectrum. Could it be coming from us? Tony didn't answer right away. He looked to Shuri's face on a video panel. She was now fully focused. No grin. I traced the faint orbital blink, Shuri said. It is hidden inside normal satellite traffic. Tony's shoulders stiffened. Tell me you're joking. Shuri shook her head. No, it is not alien. It is built with human hands. A heavy silence fell. Clark felt something cold settle in his stomach, like a stone. Tony exhaled through his nose. Okay, he said. So while we're being hunted by a space collector, someone on Earth is playing with red sun tech again. Thor's eyes flared. Who dares? Natasha's voice stayed flat. People who think fear is a plan. Strange's gaze flicked to Clark for a second, then away. If someone is pinging the scars, they are not just building a weapon. They may be calling attention. Peter's voice was small. Like ringing a bell. Tony snapped his fingers, exactly like ringing a bell. Clark's hands clenched again, then opened. He forced his breathing to stay slow. He did not want them to see him as a bomb. He wanted them to see him as a person, standing in the middle of a storm. Steve stepped in front of the screens, blocking the worst of the spinning maps. "We focus," he said. "We protect people. We find the source of the red tech. We prepare for Brainiac." Tony raised a finger. "Also, we try not to kill each other while doing it." Peter lifted his hand like he was in class. "Question. Is there a chance Brainiac just leaves? Like he got the data and now he's bored?" Clark shook his head. "No." Natasha didn't even blink. "No." Strange's voice was quiet. "He spoke your name. That is not boredom." Thor's mouth pulled into a grim line. "He wants a trophy." Clark looked down at the floor for a second, then back up. "He wants a key," he said. Tony frowned. "Key to what?" Clark's voice stayed steady, but his thoughts were loud inside his skull. Key to the scars. Key to the doors between worlds. Key to the thing Clark had become during the convergence, even if he no longer felt like it. "A way through," Clark said simply. A new notification chimed. Friday's voice filled the room. "Incoming request from the Inter-Reality Compact Council. Emergency session scheduled in 1 hour." Tony groaned. "Of course." Peter looked at Tony. "You don't like meetings." Tony stared at him. "I love meetings. I love forms. I love being told to submit a statement while the sky is on fire." Steve glanced at Clark. "You should come," he said. Clark nodded. "I will." Tony pointed at him. "And don't let them turn you into a clause in a document." Clark's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "I'll try." An hour later, the council chamber felt like a different kind of battlefield. It was not loud like Geneva had been. It was polished, clean, full of careful words. Screens showed delegates from across the world. Some were in suits, some in uniforms, some in rooms so private Clark could hear the buzz of the lights, but not the shape of the space. At the center, a council chair spoke. "We have endured an inter-reality event," she said. "We have now witnessed an organized extraterrestrial incursion tied to that event. We must act." Clark stood at a podium with Steve and Tony slightly behind him. Strange stood off to the side like a warning sign, arms folded, eyes sharp. The first questions were predictable. "How do we know Superman is not the cause? What guarantees do we have? What is his legal status?" Tony muttered. "Oh, here we go." Clark answered calmly, like he was speaking to a scared child instead of a nervous world. "I did not bring Brainiac here," Clark said, "but the scars made it easier for him to find this universe. Those scars are real. We need to protect them. We need to protect people." A delegate with a tight smile said, "We appreciate your service, but service does not replace oversight." Another voice cut in, more aggressive. "Oversight means control. Control means safety." Clark felt a familiar pressure rise behind his ribs. He remembered chains made of red light, satellites locking onto him, people cheering because they thought it made them safe. He kept his tone even. "Oversight is not the same as ownership," Clark said. "I am willing to be accountable. I am not willing to be contained." A murmur moved through the chamber. Then a face appeared on a screen near the front. General Thaddeus Ross. Clark felt the air change. Ross looked calm. Too calm, like a man wearing a mask that fit well. "Superman," Ross said, smooth as glass. "No one is talking about ownership." Tony's head turned slightly. "Oh, really?" Ross continued. "We are talking about preparedness. We just watched a hostile force nearly take a global summit. If we had the right tools, this would not have happened." Steve's eyes narrowed. "What tools?" Ross's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A layered defense system, emergency containment fields, non-lethal red spectrum dampeners, strictly regulated." Tony's laugh was sharp. "You mean the thing you already tried?" Ross's voice cooled. I mean an improved version, with oversight. Clark watched Ross's face. He listened to his heartbeat. Ross's heart was steady. Too steady. Like he had practiced this moment. Clark felt anger rise. Not hot and wild. Cold and clean. Ross was selling fear again. A delegate leaned forward. If such a system exists, why was it not used in Geneva? Ross's eyes flickered for a fraction of a second, then returned to calm. Because it does not yet exist in an approved form, he said. Tony's hands flexed. Clark could tell Tony wanted to tear the whole chamber apart with words. Steve stepped in before Tony could explode. We need unity, Steve said. Not power grabs. Ross spread his hands. Unity requires structure. Strange's voice cut in like a blade. Structure is not an excuse to ring a bell into the void. Ross's eyes shifted to Strange. Are you accusing me of something, sorcerer? Strange's expression didn't change. I'm warning you. The room grew tense. Clark could feel it turning. This was not just about drones. This was about the world deciding what Superman was allowed to be. A delegate's assistant walked up to Clark's podium and placed a thick stack of papers down. Clark glanced at the top page. Inter-reality visitor, compliance addendum, emergency powers. It had a box labeled voluntary tracking agreement, and another, acceptable restraint measures. Clark stared at it for a long second. Then he slid the papers back, gently, like he was returning a knife to someone without getting cut. I will not sign this, he said. A few voices rose at once. Why not? It's voluntary. Don't you want the world to feel safe? Clark's voice stayed calm. People can feel safe without owning someone, he said. If your safety plan depends on chains, it is not safety. It is fear. Ross's jaw tightened. You're making it harder than it needs to be. Tony snapped. Oh, he's not the one making it hard. Steve raised a hand. Enough. Clark turned toward the chamber again. I will cooperate with the Avengers, he said. With Dr. Strange. With nations that want to protect people. But I will not be treated like a weapon in storage. He paused. And if someone is building red spectrum tools in secret, he added, voice steady, they are putting Earth at more risk, not less. A sharp silence followed that. Ross's eyes went cold. The chair cleared her throat. We will table the compliance addendum for now, she said. We will focus on the immediate threat. The meeting ended with no clean victory, just a fragile agreement, like a bridge made of thin boards. When the screens went dark, Tony exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for an hour. That was fun, Tony said, deadpan. Anyone want to do it again tomorrow? Peter, who had watched from the side, whispered to Clark. I hate forms. Clark looked at him. Me too. Peter blinked. Wait, you hate forms? Clark's mouth twitched. I grew up on a farm. The only forms we had were for weather and crops. Peter let out a shaky laugh. That's actually kind of nice. They walked out into a hallway. The building was quiet here. No cameras, no microphones, just the soft hum of lights and distant footsteps. Peter kept close to Clark, like the space between them was a safety line. Do you think people really see you as, like, a thing? Peter asked. Clark's eyes softened. Some do, he said. Peter's voice was small. That's not fair. Clark stopped walking. For a moment, he looked down at Peter. Fair is not promised, Clark said, but we can still choose what we do. Peter swallowed. I'm scared, he admitted. Not of you. Of all of it. Like the world is a chessboard, and we're the pieces. Clark nodded. Fear is normal, he said. It means you understand the stakes. Peter's eyes flickered. And what if we mess up? Clark put a hand on Peter's shoulder. It was gentle. Not heavy. Then we fix it, Clark said. We learn. We don't quit. Peter's lips pressed together. Okay, he said, like he was trying to believe it. Clark looked forward again. His mind kept returning to one thing. The red pulse. It wasn't coming from Brainiac's drones alone. It felt familiar, like the echo of a tool built by humans. If Ross was lying, then the danger was closer than deep space. That thought made Clark's stomach tighten again. He turned toward Tony, who was waiting by a glass wall, staring out at the sky like he wanted to punch it. I need to find where the red energy is coming from, Clark said. Tony glanced at him. As Superman? Clark shook his head. As Clark Kent. Tony's eyebrows rose. Okay, reporter mode. Clark nodded. It's what I do. I find truth. I don't want to guess. Tony's mouth pulled into a grim smile. I hate that this makes you even more dangerous. Not because you can lift buildings, because you can ask questions. Steve stepped closer. You won't do it alone, he said. Natasha's voice came from behind them. Good, she said. Because asking questions in the wrong rooms gets you killed. Strange's eyes were distant, like he was seeing patterns in the air. And it may be the only way to stop the next crack from widening. Clark looked up at the sky again. He could almost feel something out there, watching. Somewhere beyond the stars, a mind studied him with no emotion. In a dark, silent space far from Earth, Brainiac's systems ran without rest. He replayed Geneva again and again. He did not watch with anger. He watched with purpose. Superman's flight path, Superman's speed, Superman's priorities. He marked every moment Superman chose a life over a strike. He labeled it. Pattern. Rescue first. He processed the red spectrum pulse response. He labeled it too. Countermeasure. Effective. Then he opened a new file. Strategy revision. He did not plan to beat Superman in a fair fight. Not yet. He planned to make Superman choose. A small city block in Geneva had almost been bottled. Brainiac adjusted his plan to something smaller, something cleaner, something personal. He did not need a city to force a choice. He needed one person. He ran a scan through the data. He picked the best candidate for leverage, and he began to prepare a bottle made just for that. Far away, on another path, another watcher also noticed the same event. Thanos stood in a quiet room lit by starlight, turning, something small in his hand. Not a stone yet. Not today. Just a piece of metal from a dead world. He listened to reports, to whispers that traveled through space faster than rumors on Earth. A collector has come, someone had said. And the Kryptonian is there, another voice had added. Thanos' mouth curved. Not joy. Interest. Hope, he murmured, as if tasting the word. Control. He understood both. He had built an empire on one and promised himself it was the other. He did not move yet. He did not need to. Hunters made noise. Noise created openings. And openings were where Thanos did his best work. Back on Earth, Clark started the only way he knew how. He went looking for the truth. The first step was simple. Clark put on his glasses. It didn't change his face. It didn't make him invisible. But it changed how he moved. He kept his shoulders slightly rounded. He let his steps be normal. He let his eyes lower, like a person who did not expect the world to move aside. He walked into a building full of files, rules, and bored workers. A place that smelled like paper and coffee. Tony had called it the paperwork dungeon. Clark called it Tuesday. Peter walked beside him, wearing a hoodie, and trying very hard not to look like Spider-Man. He failed, mostly because he kept looking up at ceilings like he expected robots to drop on them. Why are we here? Peter whispered. Clark spoke softly. These offices track contractors, supplies, payments. If someone is building a secret satellite system, it leaves a trail. Peter frowned. But if it's secret, Wouldn't they hide the trail? Clark nodded. They try, but people make mistakes, and truth tends to leak. Peter stared at him. You really talk like a reporter. Clark almost smiled. That's because I am one. They reached a counter. A clerk looked up. Next. Clark stepped forward. Clark Kent, he said, clear and polite. I'm looking for records on orbital component shipments and radiation filter purchases in the last 6 months. The clerk blinked slowly. That's specific, Clark nodded. Yes, the clerk typed. Her screen flashed, then flashed again. Her face tightened. Your name is flagged. Clark kept his expression neutral. Flagged? She hesitated, then lowered her voice. It says you're an inter-reality visitor, and I should notify. The printer beside her began to scream to life. Pages spilled out like a waterfall. Peter stared. No. Clark exhaled. Yes. The clerk grabbed the stack and slid it across like she was getting rid of a cursed object. These are required forms, she said quickly. Please fill them out and return. Clark gently pushed them back. Not today, he said. Peter leaned in and whispered. You're like allergic to paperwork. Clark whispered back. I'm resisting. They stepped away from the counter. Clark scanned the room with his eyes, not his powers. A security guard by the door looked toward them. His hand touched his radio. Clark caught it. Peter caught it too. Peter said. I think we're about to be politely arrested. Clark stayed calm. Time to leave. They walked out at a normal pace. Outside, Tony waited near the curb, leaning against a car, sunglasses on like he thought it made him less obvious. It didn't. You got forms, didn't you? Tony asked. Peter threw his hands up. So many forms. Tony pointed at Clark. I told you. The world sees a weird name and the printer goes into panic mode. Clark's voice stayed even. They flagged my name. Someone already put me in the system. Tony's expression shifted. That's bad. Natasha appeared from the side street like she had always been there. It means the trail is already being managed, she said. Clark looked at her. Can you help us find the trail anyway? Natasha's mouth pulled into a small, sharp smile. That's my job. Shuri's voice came from Tony's earpiece. And my job is to make your job easier, she said. Send me any part numbers you find. I'll cross-check with Wakandan monitors. Tony nodded. Okay, Team No Chains is officially active. Peter blinked. Is that our name? Tony shrugged. It is now. They moved their search to a different place. Not an office. A port. A line of containers stacked like giant blocks. Forklifts moved. Workers shouted. The air smelled like salt and oil. Natasha stood in simple clothes, hair tucked under a cap. She looked like another worker. That was her superpower. Clark walked beside her, hands in pockets, eyes scanning labels. Peter trailed behind, trying not to stare at everything. Natasha spoke quietly. We're looking for shipments that shouldn't exist, she said. Odd destinations, fake company names, orders that get rerouted at the last moment. Clark nodded. And radiation filters. Natasha glanced at him. You know what you felt. Clark's voice was low. Red sun energy, he said. Not natural, engineered. Natasha's eyes stayed forward. Ross. Clark didn't say the name. He didn't need to. They found the first crack in the story by accident. A container marked as medical equipment had shielding inside. Clark didn't open it with strength. He didn't tear. He simply listened. Inside, the hum of powered parts. The faint click of circuits waiting to be turned on. Clark's eyes narrowed. Natasha tapped the seal and slipped a thin tool under it. In seconds, it popped open. Inside were metal components shaped like satellite plates. Clean. New. Human-made. Peter leaned in. That's not a stethoscope. Natasha's voice stayed flat. No. Tony, watching through a drone camera, swore softly in their comms. That's orbital-grade hardware? Clark stared at the parts. Where is it going? Natasha lifted a manifest sheet and scanned it. A research facility in the mountains, she said. Private, restricted. And the company name is fake. Tony's voice sharpened. Send me the route, now. Clark's mind clicked pieces together. A hidden satellite blink in orbit. Human red spectrum tech. Fake shipments. A private facility. It was the same shape as last time, just smaller. Smarter. Hidden. Peter swallowed. So, we go there? Natasha looked at Clark. If we go loud, they wipe everything, she said. If we go quiet, we might learn who is funding it. Clark nodded. Quiet, he agreed. Tony sighed. I hate quiet, he said. But fine. That night, they moved like a careful plan. Strange opened a portal not to the front door, but to a patch of forest behind the facility, where cameras wouldn't see a spark. Clark stepped through first, breath steady. The air was cold. Pines stood tall and silent. A fence cut through the trees, topped with sensors and wire. Natasha appeared beside him, already scanning. Peter stepped through last, eyes wide. Okay, he whispered. This is spooky. Tony's voice came in calm. Remember, no hero poses, no dramatic entrances. We're ghosts, Peter whispered. Spider ghost? Tony ignored him. Clark could see the facility beyond the fence. Low buildings, bright security lights, patrol routes. A satellite dish pointed at the sky like a finger. Natasha pointed. 2 guards, thermal cameras, motion sensors. We avoid, not fight. Clark nodded. He didn't want to hurt anyone who thought they were just doing a job. Strange's voice came through comms. I can hold a small blind spot for 90 seconds, he said. After that, the wards here will notice. Clark's eyes narrowed. Wards? Strange sounded tense. Someone learned from me. That was new. And bad. Natasha moved first. She slipped under the fence with a tool and a tight crawl, quick and clean. Peter followed, copying her like a clumsy apprentice. Clark could have stepped over the fence without touching it. He didn't. He went through the gap because quiet meant respect for the plan. They reached a side door. Natasha picked the lock. The door clicked open. Inside, the air smelled like metal and ozone. They moved down a hallway lined with security panels. Clark's hearing caught voices deeper inside. Scientists, engineers, not alien, human. He heard the words that made his stomach tighten. Red spectrum dampener. Target lock. Calibration for Kryptonian tissue response. Peter's eyes widened behind his mask. They're talking about you, he whispered. Clark's voice stayed low. I know. They reached a lab. What Clark saw made something inside him go still. On a table lay a portable emitter unit. Sleek, compact. A weapon that could fit in a case. On screens, diagrams showed a human-shaped target with a bright red outline around the muscles and nerves. A label at the top of the main monitor read, Project Red Dawn. Peter stared. That's Ross? Natasha's face was hard. It has his fingerprints all over it. Clark stepped closer to the table. He did not touch the emitter at first. He stared at it like it was a snake. He thought of the crane workers, the summit civilians, the people he saved. Then he thought of a beam like this, hitting him at the wrong moment over a crowded street. His chest felt tight. Not fear for himself. Fear for what it would let others do. Tony's voice came through, quiet and furious. I'm logging everything. Screenshots, schematics, serial numbers. If Ross tries to deny it, I'll mail him his own lies. Shuri's voice joined in, sharp. The design is crude compared to Wakanda, but it is clever. It is tuned for you. Clark finally touched the emitter with 2 fingers, like he was checking if it was real. It was cold metal. It was human intention. It was betrayal wrapped in engineering. Natasha moved to a server rack. "We need the main storage," she said. "Plans, orders, names." Clark looked at a larger display near the back. A satellite model floated on screen. Not a wide net like before. Small. Focused. Precise beams. Under it was a line of text that made Clark's skin prickle. "Scar Ping Protocol. Active tests," Peter whispered. "Ping?" Clark's eyes narrowed. "A beacon," he said. Strange's voice came over comms. Tight. "Clark, what did you say?" "A beacon," Clark repeated. "They're using red spectrum pulses to tap the scars." Strange swore under his breath, which Peter found shocking for exactly 1 second before panic took over. Tony's voice turned urgent. "If they've been pinging scars, they might have made a door easier to find." Natasha yanked a cable and slid a drive into a portable reader. "Copying now," she said. "Fast." Clark stepped away from the screens, scanning the room with his senses. He felt it before he saw it. A thin vibration in the air, like reality being brushed the wrong way. He turned. At the far wall, near a sealed containment chamber, the air shimmered. A small crack of light appeared, not orange like Strange's portals. It was pale and clean, like a cold window opening. Peter's voice rose. Guys?" The crack widened. Something slid through. A probe. Not a drone like the ones over Geneva. This was smaller and sharper, shaped like a needle with tiny limbs. It hovered for half a second, scanning. Then it moved. Straight toward the red dawn table. Like it knew exactly where to go. Clark moved faster than sound. He grabbed the probe mid-air. For a split second, he felt it fight. Not with strength, but with a pulse. Red light flashed from the walls. The lab lights shifted. The air seemed to thicken. Clark's body reacted instantly. His strength dipped, his speed slowed by a fraction. Enough. The probe slipped out of his grip like a fish. Peter shouted, "They turned it on!" Natasha's eyes snapped to a control panel. "Red emitters are active." Clark's jaw tightened. Ross hadn't just built a weapon. He'd built a room that could weaken Superman. The probe darted toward the servers. If it got the data, Brainiac would have the blueprint to hurt Clark whenever he wanted. Clark lunged again, moving through the heavier air. He couldn't be everywhere at once, not like this. So he did the thing Brainiac didn't predict. He chose people first. The probe fired a small bolt into the ceiling. A panel burst. Sparks rained down. A human scientist in the hallway screamed and fell. Clark shot sideways, caught the falling man, and set him down gently behind a table. That split second was all the probe needed. It reached the server rack. Natasha fired, hitting it with a shock round. The probe jolted, twitched, then kept moving. Peter shot webs at it. The webs stuck. Then the probe's surface heated, and the webbing burned away. Peter's voice cracked. "It has a web-melting setting? That's personal." Clark forced his breathing steady. He was weaker in this room, but he was still Superman. He moved in a tight pattern now, not chasing wildly. He anticipated. He listened for the tiny hum of its movement. He waited for it to commit. The probe dove for the drive Natasha was copying. Clark stepped into its path and clapped both hands around it, hard. This time, he didn't squeeze to crush. He locked his grip and turned his body, using leverage. He slammed it into the floor. Concrete cracked. The probe jerked, trying to slip away again. Clark pinned it with his palm. Natasha ran to the emitter controls and began ripping wires. "Tony," she barked. "How do I shut these red emitters without blowing the building?" Tony's voice was already moving fast. "Panel B, cut blue, then green. Not red. If you cut red, it spikes." Peter yelled. "Why is it always the red wire?" Tony snapped. "Because life hates us." Natasha cut blue, then green. The red hum in the air flickered but didn't die. Shuri's voice came in, Urgent. There are backup cells. 2 of them. Hidden under the floor. I see the layout. Natasha, left corner. Natasha sprinted. Clark's grip on the probe tightened as it fought like a trapped insect. Its surface flashed, and a tiny projector lit up in the air. A cold machine voice filled the lab. Data acquisition, in progress. Peter looked around wildly. How? It's stuck! Tony's voice went flat with dread. Because it already sent a burst. Clark felt it then. A tiny spike of signal, like a needle of light, shot through the shimmer crack. The probe didn't need to escape with the drive. It just needed a copy. Clark's stomach dropped. He looked at the shimmer crack in the wall. It was still open, trembling. A path. A door. Strange's voice came in strained. I feel it. That is not my portal. That is the scar being forced open. Clark's eyes locked on the crack. If it widened, more than a probe could come through. Natasha ripped up a floor panel and found a compact power cell glowing red. She smashed it with a heavy tool. The hum dropped. Clark felt his strength rise a little, like sunlight returning. Tony's voice sharpened. 1 more cell. Peter pointed. There. He saw it because his spider sense screamed. Another cell pulsed under a second panel. Natasha crossed the room to it, but the probe jerked beneath Clark's hand, and a thin blade snapped out, aiming for Peter's leg. Clark moved on instinct. He let the probe go for half a heartbeat, and shoved Peter back with an open palm, not hard enough to hurt, just enough to clear him. The blade hit empty air. Peter stumbled, eyes wide. Thanks. Clark grabbed the probe again and this time squeezed. Metal shrieked. The probe collapsed in on itself. Its lights went out. But the damage was already done. Natasha smashed the second cell. The red hum died completely. The lab lights returned to normal. Clark breathed out, slow. He turned toward the shimmer crack. It was still there, but weaker now. Unstable. Strange's voice was tight. I can seal it from my side if you give me a second. Tony's armor roared as he blasted through the facility wall from outside, landing in the lab like a furious meteor made of metal. You guys couldn't wait for me to have the fun, Tony snapped, then saw the red dawn displays. His voice turned cold. Oh, Ross. Clark looked at Tony. Brainiac got data, Clark said. Even if we shut it down, he got something. Tony's face hardened. Then we hit him with worse data, he said. We make our own counter-counters. Shuri's voice was sharp and focused. I'm already working, she said. And I am offended. Strange's portal finally appeared, orange and loud compared to the pale crack. He stepped through, hands already glowing. He pressed both palms toward the shimmer crack. Symbols spun in the air like rotating locks. The crack resisted, trembling like a stubborn door. Strange gritted his teeth. This is what I feared, he said. The scar is being used. It remembers being open. Clark stepped closer. He didn't touch Strange. He didn't want to disrupt. But he spoke, calm and steady. You can do it, he said. Strange's eyes flickered, annoyed at encouragement, but he pushed harder. The crack tightened, then snapped shut with a soft sound, like a candle being pinched out. The air went still. For a second, no one moved. Then Tony spoke, voice low. Okay, he said. We got proof. We got schematics. We got a secret weapon lab that should not exist. Natasha held up the copied drive. And we got names, she said. Peter's voice shook. So Ross is done, right? Steve's voice came through comms from outside, steady. Not automatically, he said. But we can corner him. Clark looked at the red dawn emitter again. He felt a quiet sadness under, the anger. He wanted to believe Earth could learn. He wanted to believe fear didn't always win. But fear had built this room. Tony walked up beside Clark. He didn't joke now. His face was serious. "You feel betrayed," Tony said. Clark nodded once. "Yes." Tony's eyes stayed on the emitter. "Welcome to the club," he said quietly. "We have jackets. They're expensive, and they come with more paperwork." Clark almost smiled. Almost. Natasha's eyes stayed sharp. "We need to leave," she said. "Security will lock down once they realize we're here." Peter looked around. "We're just leaving? After all this?" Tony's voice turned hard. "We're leaving with evidence," he said. "Evidence is how you kill a lie without becoming the lie." They moved fast. Strange opened a portal back to safety. As Clark stepped through, he paused and looked back at the lab one last time. The screen still glowed with his outline, a human-shaped target, a reminder that even heroes could be reduced to a problem on a monitor. Clark turned away. Back at Avengers HQ, they spread the evidence out like a war map. Names, routes, funding chains, contractor lists. Tony paced. Steve watched, calm but tense. Natasha sat still, already planning the next move. Peter hovered near Clark like he didn't want to let him drift too far into his own thoughts. Shuri's face filled a screen again. "The design includes a signal burst module," she said. "That probe used it. The data went out." Tony's jaw clenched. "So Brainiac now has a human-built red spectrum playbook." Strange's voice was grim. "Which means next time, he won't need Ross to weaken Clark. He can build his own." Clark stared at the table. His voice stayed simple. "He is adapting." Steve nodded. "So do we." Peter swallowed. "What happens now?" Tony looked at the evidence. "Now," he said, "we take this to the Compact Council. We force daylight on it." Natasha's eyes narrowed. "Ross will deny," she said. "He'll call it fake. He'll say it's alien." Tony lifted a finger. "That's why we have serial numbers and supply routes," he said. "Also because I recorded the lab from 6 angles, in 8K, with timestamps." Peter blinked. "You're kind of scary." Tony smiled without humor. "Only to liars." Clark finally spoke the thought that had been sitting in his chest like a weight. "Even if Ross is exposed," Clark said, "the damage is done." Steve looked at him. "Because Brainiac got the data." Clark nodded. "And because the scars were pinged," he said. "He knows the doorways are real. He knows Earth can be called." Strange's eyes were distant. "And the scars may respond again," he said. "They may remember this pressure." The room felt colder. Tony broke it with a sharp breath. "Okay," he said. "So we stop Ross from ringing the bell again, and we build something that can stop Brainiac from using the bell he already heard." Peter raised his hand slowly. "And what about Clark?" Everyone looked at Clark. Clark kept his posture steady. He did not flinch. "I'm still here," he said. "I'm not running." Tony's voice softened, just a little. "We're not asking you to," he said. Natasha's gaze was steady. "But we are going to be honest," she said. "Brainiac is going to stop playing with drones. He'll go personal." Clark nodded. "I know." His thoughts went to the way Brainiac had spoken his name, the way the Collector had tried to bottle a living space, the way the probe had come straight to the data. This wasn't random violence. It was a plan. Clark looked at Peter, who was trying to be brave and doing a good job of it. Clark looked at Steve, who would stand in front of anything if it kept people safe. Clark looked at Tony, who was already building answers out of fear and love in equal measure. Then Clark looked at the window, at the sky. His voice stayed calm. "Then we prepare," Clark said. And far beyond Earth, in the quiet where stars didn't care about human fear, Brainiac processed the new information. Human red spectrum systems, portable emitters, target lock methods. The word Ross meant nothing to him, but the function meant everything. He ran simulations. He adjusted his compression fields. He refined his bottles. He began building a prison shaped around a single life. Not a city this time. A person. A person Superman would not abandon. On a different path, Thanos heard rumors too. A collector. A weakening light. A hero trapped between worlds. Thanos did not hurry. He only smiled, slow and sure. Because temptation tasted best when someone was already tired. And Clark, for all his strength, was carrying a tired kind of loneliness that even a yellow sun could not burn away. 2 weeks passed, and the world tried to act normal again. Clark made himself follow a routine because drifting was dangerous. In the morning, he helped where he could. He lifted a derailed train back onto its tracks in Ohio. He carried a burning tanker away from a highway in Texas. He hovered above a flooded town and listened for voices under the water, then pulled people out one by one. At night, he trained. Not because he needed bigger muscles, because he needed better control when he was tired, angry, or weakened. Thor met him over the ocean, where no buildings could fall on anyone. The sky was clear, the water below was black, and the wind was sharp. Thor flew at him like a thunderbolt. Clark didn't flinch. He turned, caught Mjolnir with both hands, and stopped it without letting it swing into the sea. The hammer shook and hummed, like it was arguing with physics. Thor grinned, wild and proud. "You are strong, Kryptonian." Clark released the hammer with care. "So are you." Thor swung again, and lightning flashed. Clark dodged, not because lightning could end him, but because he was practicing something new, moving perfectly, even when his body wanted to rely on raw power. Between strikes, Thor talked the way he always did, loud, direct. "You carry your sadness like armor," Thor said once, hovering with stormlight around his hair. "Armor is good, but it can also make you slow." Clark looked out at the horizon. "I can't go back," he said. Thor's face softened, just a little. "Then you choose where you stand," he said. "Even gods do that." Clark didn't answer right away, but the words stayed in his mind. After training, he became Clark Kent again. He didn't do it to pretend. He did it because it was part of him. It was how he kept his heart human. He sat with Steve in quiet rooms and listened to plans. He stood with Natasha in the shadow of hallways while she explained how to walk into a lie without making it scream. He watched Tony and Shuri argue through screens about signal interference, encryption, and why every villain loves red light. And every single time Clark tried to fix his legal identity problem, the world threw paper at him like confetti. One afternoon, he walked into a city office again because Tony insisted that "we will win this war with forms if it kills me." The clerk looked at his glasses and the calm line of his mouth and said, "Name?" "Clark Kent." Her screen flashed. Then her printer screamed. She didn't even reach for the stack this time. She just slid it over with the tired face of someone handing a cat to its owner. Tony, standing behind Clark, muttered, "I love this planet." Clark turned a page and found a new box added in bold. "Voluntary location sharing, required for certain visitor classes." Clark slowly set the page down. Tony lifted both hands. "Not my box. I did not build the box. I hate the box." Clark looked at the clerk kindly. "Can you tell me who added that requirement?" The clerk swallowed. I can't." Clark nodded. "That's okay." They left without signing anything. Again. Outside, Tony shoved the stack into a recycling bin like it had insulted his family. "Okay," he said. "New plan. We make you a fake identity that is so boring no one looks at it." Clark blinked. "Isn't that illegal?" Tony looked offended. "It's administrative art." Peter, standing nearby, whispered, "Please name it something funny." Clark sighed. "No." Tony grinned. Fine. Clark Kent, local reporter, allergic to paperwork. Peter snorted. That's true. Clark tried not to smile. He failed. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Then Friday's voice cut through the air in Tony's helmet, and Tony's smile died. Confirmed update, Friday said. Inter-Reality Compact Council has issued a temporary public order restricting red spectrum research. Enforcement pending. Tony's jaw tightened. Pending, he repeated. That word is doing a lot of work. Clark felt the same cold stone in his stomach again. Ross won't stop because of a memo, he said. Tony glanced at him. Yeah, he said, and we still don't know how deep his backup plans go. Across town, in a building with thick walls and private guards, Ross watched the same council update on a screen. He sat in a leather chair and acted like a man who had already accepted defeat. But his eyes didn't match the performance. A staffer stood near the door, nervous. Sir, the council wants a full audit. They're using Stark's evidence. They're calling it an illegal weapons program. Ross didn't move. They can call it whatever they like. Sir, the staffer said carefully, they are removing you from advisory roles. They're freezing accounts. Ross's hand lifted. The staffer stopped talking immediately. Ross leaned forward, calm as ice. Do you know why I'm still here? He asked. Even after they took my tools. Even after they mocked me. The staffer swallowed. Because you have support? Ross nodded. Because fear has support, he said. Fear is loyal. He tapped a folder on his desk. Inside were names. Quiet names. People in agencies, contractors, security firms, and committees that met in rooms without cameras. They can strip my titles, Ross said. They cannot strip my network. The staffer hesitated. Sir, the red spectrum satellites, Ross's eyes sharpened, are not a net, he said. They are a needle. A needle does not need permission to exist. It only needs to be hidden. His voice dropped. And if Brainiac is coming, he added, then Earth will beg for my needle. The staffer's voice shook. You're sure he's coming back? Ross's mouth curled. Not a smile. He already did, he said. He sent a probe into my lab, which means the universe is listening to my signal. The staffer looked horrified. That means I was right, Ross said simply. We are not alone, and the ones who come will not ask for consent. He stood. Make sure the next test window is clean, Ross said. No leaks, no mistakes. The staffer nodded quickly and left. Ross stared at the dark reflection of the screen for a long time. Then he spoke to it, like the image could hear. You want him, Ross whispered. Fine, but you don't get him for free. That night, Clark stood on a high ledge in New York, watching traffic flow below like lines of light. He listened. He always listened. And in the quiet between sirens and city noise, he heard something else. Not a scream. Not a heartbeat. A voice that did not come from anywhere. It came from inside the air. Kal-El. Clark's spine stiffened. The voice was clean and flat, like a machine reading a sentence. I have your people, it said. Clark's eyes narrowed. His senses flared outward. He didn't see a drone. He didn't see a ship. But he felt a thin ripple in reality, like someone tapping on the scar Strange had sealed. Show me, Clark said quietly. A picture formed in his mind, not as a dream, but as a projected file. A small curved space, like the inside of a clear sphere. Inside it, people. A woman clutching a child. A man with a bloody sleeve. A diplomat from Geneva. Clark remembered saving. They looked alive, terrified, and cramped, like air was limited. Clark's throat tightened. Return them, he said. Collection requires preservation, the voice replied. Your compliance improves outcome. Clark's fists clenched, then loosened. He forced his tone to stay calm. You want me? Yes, Brainiac said. You are required. Clark swallowed the anger and fear and held on to the one thing that mattered. Those people go free first, Clark said. A pause. Then Brainiac spoke again, almost gently, in the way a cold mind pretends to be kind. You desire home, Brainiac said. You desire Lois Lane. You desire Metropolis. Clark's stomach dropped. He did not show it. But inside, something painful turned. How do you know her name? Clark asked. Scars hold echoes, Brainiac said. Echoes can be read. Echoes can be used. A new image flashed in Clark's mind. Not Lois. Not truly. Just a blurry outline. A city skyline that looked like Metropolis, but twisted by static. A voice that almost sounded like hers, but wrong, like a radio caught between stations. It was a hook, nothing more. But hook still hurt. If you comply, Brainiac said, I will return your bottled specimens. I will return the Geneva set. I will reduce loss. Clark's jaw tightened. If I comply, you keep doing this, he said. A pause. Brainiac did not deny it. Your refusal increases loss, Brainiac said. The voice vanished. The city noise rushed back in, loud and normal, like the world was trying to pretend nothing had happened. Clark stayed on the ledge, still as stone. He felt the weight of a simple truth. Brainiac had learned his pattern. Rescue first. Now Brainiac was using it like a lever. A soft landing happened behind him. Tony. His suit was off. He wore normal clothes, but his eyes were sharp and tired. You got the call, Tony said quietly. Clark nodded once. Tony's jaw clenched. What did he offer? Clark's voice came out rougher than he wanted. Hostages, he said. And an echo. A fake glimpse of my home. Tony's face tightened in something like sympathy, but he didn't let it turn into pity. He's fishing, Tony said. He wants you off balance. Clark stared at the street below. It worked. Tony stepped closer, careful, like he didn't want to crowd him. You're allowed to want home, Tony said. Wanting something doesn't make you weak. Clark's eyes flicked toward him. What if the only way to save those people is to give him what he wants? Clark asked. Tony didn't answer fast, because this wasn't a joke. Finally, Tony said. Then we find a third option, he said, because you are not a trade item. Clark's chest rose and fell slowly. Then another sound came, a whisper of cold air. A figure stood on a nearby rooftop edge, as if he had always been there. Tall, thin, pale. Ebony Maw. His face held a calm, almost polite smile. Tony's posture snapped tight. No, Tony said. Absolutely not. You do not get to show up uninvited again. Maw's eyes slid to Tony, then to Clark. I bring words, he said softly. Not violence. Clark's eyes narrowed. From Thanos. Maw inclined his head. Yes. My master watches the currents of fate. He sees your struggle. Tony let out a sharp laugh. He sees an opportunity. Maw's smile didn't change. Opportunity is simply truth arriving early. Clark's voice stayed steady. Speak. Maw lifted one hand. Your home is closed, he said. The door between worlds is scarred. My master seeks keys that open all doors. Clark felt his throat tighten again. The stones, he said. Maw's eyes gleamed. You understand. Tony stepped forward. Back up, he snapped. You do not get to tempt him like he's a vending machine. Maw's gaze stayed on Clark. My master can open a path, he said. A clean path, not an echo, not a trick. A true way home. Clark's heart thumped hard. He hated that it did. Maw's voice softened, like honey over poison. In return, you will not interfere when balance is restored. Tony's face went dark. Balance, he repeated. That's what he calls it. Clark looked at Ma. He thought of Lois, real and warm, not a static ghost. He thought of Smallville Fields. He thought of the life he might never touch again. Then he thought of Geneva, of frightened eyes inside a bottle, of children who would be collected next. He lifted his chin. "No," Clark said. Ma's smile faltered for the first time, just slightly. Clark's voice stayed calm but firm. "I will not buy my comfort with other people's pain," he said. "I will not trade this world's future for my past." Tony exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. "Good," he muttered. Ma's eyes narrowed. "Then you choose loss." "I choose responsibility," Clark replied. Ma studied him, then bowed his head as if he were disappointed in a student. "So be it," he said. He stepped backward into the dark like the air swallowed him. When he was gone, Tony let out a long breath and rubbed his face with one hand. "Okay," he said. "That was the worst group chat invite I've ever seen." Clark didn't laugh. He looked out at the city again. "Brainiac is going to force the choice harder," he said. Tony nodded. "Yeah," he said. "So we hit him first." The plan came together in a room full of people who didn't fully agree on anything except one thing. Nobody was leaving those hostages behind. Steve stood at the center, hands on a table, eyes moving over a 3D map Tony projected into the air. It showed the Earth, the moon, and a zone of empty space where strange readings kept flickering in and out. "We can't just fly into orbit and start punching," Steve said. "We need a clean entry, a clean exit, and we need to keep civilians alive." Thor's mouth tightened. "Then we strike like thunder," he said. "Fast, decisive." Natasha pointed at the flicker zone. "Brainiac's tech can hide, but it has to send signals to keep a bottle stable," she said. "That means it leaks patterns." Shuri's voice came through a screen. "I can jam the leak," she said. "Not fully, but enough to slow his reaction time." Tony tapped a second marker. "Ross's needle satellite is still blinking," he said. "We can't waste time fighting two problems. I'm sending a drone to fry it." Steve looked at him. "Can you do it without making the sky look like a war?" Tony's mouth twisted. "I can make it look like a technical failure," he said, "which is basically my love language." Peter swallowed and raised a hand halfway. "So, where are the hostages?" Strange's eyes were tired, but focused. "Inside a bottle," he said. "Not on Earth. Not exactly in normal space." Clark stood slightly apart, listening to all of it. His face was calm, but inside he felt like a stretched cable. If they failed, people stayed trapped. If he made one wrong move, Brainiac would get him and use him as a key. Steve looked at Clark. "You don't have to carry this alone," Steve said. Clark nodded once. "I know." Then Tony's helmet snapped onto his head, and he looked at Clark like he was trying to be brave in his own way. "Rule 1, Tony said. If Brainiac tries to isolate you, you don't chase him." Clark's eyes narrowed. "If he has people—" Tony cut him off gently, but firmly. "You don't chase him alone," Tony repeated. "We do this together, or we don't do it." Clark held Tony's gaze, then nodded. "Together," he said. Strange lifted a hand. "I can open a gate to the edge of the flicker zone," he said. "But once we're there, physics gets angry." Peter blinked. "Physics can be angry?" Tony looked at him. "Physics is always angry. It just usually pretends it's fine." They moved at dawn, not because it was pretty, because patterns mattered, and Brainiac used patterns. If they were going to break one, they would do it before he expected it. Strange opened a portal in the training bay. The ring of sparks grew, and beyond it was black space, sprinkled with stars. Peter stepped through first and immediately made a sound like his stomach tried to quit. "Oh my gosh," he whispered. "I can see the whole planet." Thor stepped through like he owned space. Tony followed, thrusters correcting his body. Natasha went last with a tether line and a small pack of tools, calm as if she were boarding an elevator. Clark followed Steve, and the moment he crossed the portal edge, he felt the faint red pressure again. Not from Ross this time, from Brainiac's field. Shuri's voice came through comms. "I see the bottle pulse," she said. "It's like a heartbeat. I'm marking it." A shape shimmered ahead, almost invisible. Then it unfolded. A smooth, metallic structure, like a silent fortress. No windows, no lights, just cold geometry. Tony's voice went low. "There you are," he muttered. The fortress responded, not with missiles, with a net of pale light that spread outward, trying to map them in one sweep. Clark shot forward and slammed into the leading edge of the scan, bending it away from the others. The light didn't break. It flexed, like a living membrane. Red pulses flickered inside it. Clark's body felt that old heaviness again. He didn't stop. He pushed through. Thor came in from above with lightning, blasting the net. The pale light cracked in places. Tony fired beams into the cracks and widened them. "Open a lane!" Steve shouted. Natasha used the lane. She shot a line and swung into a service seam, slipping into the fortress like a knife into a gap. Peter webbed onto the hole and crawled, eyes wide. "This is so cool," he said, then corrected himself fast. "This is so terrifying." Strange hovered at the rear, hands glowing, keeping the portal stable behind them like an emergency door. Inside the fortress, Natasha moved through narrow metal corridors that shifted as she walked. Walls slid. Paths changed. It wasn't a maze by accident. It was a maze that watched you. Her calm stayed steady. "I'm in," she whispered. "No guards. Just moving hallways." Tony's voice crackled. "That's a guard," he said. "A hallway that tries to eat you." Natasha didn't react. "I'm looking for the bottle core," she said. Clark and Thor fought outside in open space, keeping the fortress busy. Drones poured out now, faster and smarter than before. These drones didn't just pulse red. They pulsed red in patterns. They tried to time it with Clark's movements. They tried to make him arrive a fraction late. Clark adapted again. He stopped flying in straight lines. He moved in sudden angles, broken rhythms, like a boxer changing footwork. A drone flashed red right as he lunged. Clark let the lunge turn into a feint. He grabbed the drone anyway, crushed it, and used its broken shell as a shield for the next pulse. Tony watched in awe, even while firing. "He's learning faster than the machine," Tony muttered. Steve, tethered to Tony's suit with a magnetic line, guided the team's external assault with calm focus. He couldn't punch drones in space like Clark could, but he could call timing, choose targets, and keep the fight from turning chaotic. "Thor, clear the top seam," Steve said. "Stark, hit the left node. Clark, hold the center. Don't drift." Clark heard, Steve, and obeyed. He held the center, because holding the center meant holding the rescue plan together. Inside, Natasha reached a chamber that felt different. The air vibrated. The walls were smoother. A soft glow pulsed through the metal, like the fortress had a heart. In the center floated a sphere, a bottle. Inside were people, small and curled in fear. Natasha's throat tightened, but her hand stayed steady. She moved to a control panel. It didn't have buttons. It had shifting symbols. "Tony," she whispered, "I found it." Tony's voice went sharp. "Good. Can you open it?" Natasha stared at the symbols, not without triggering a lock. Strange's voice cut in, focused. "Those symbols are not just code," he said. "They are rules. If you break a rule wrong, the bottle could collapse." Peter's voice came in, strained. "We really need to stop people from inventing bottles." Shuri's voice was tight. "I can feed you a translation pattern," she said. "But you must move fast." Brainiac will notice if the bottle core changes. Natasha inhaled once. "Do it," she said. Outside, the fortress shifted. A larger shape rose from its surface, like a crown. It projected a voice directly into Clark's mind again. "Compliance now," Brainiac said. The drones pulled back for half a second. Clark felt the trap. He looked for the bottle pulse and saw it. He could sense where it was, like a faint heartbeat inside a metal chest. Brainiac wanted him to dive for it alone. Clark didn't. He kept the center. "No," Clark said quietly. A new pulse hit him, stronger. For a moment, the yellow sun inside him dimmed sharply, like someone turned a dial. Clark's speed dipped. A drone slammed into his shoulder and spun him. He recovered instantly, but the message was clear. Brainiac had upgraded. Tony's voice barked. "Clark, stay with us!" Clark steadied. "I'm here," he said. Brainiac spoke again, colder. "Loss increases." The fortress opened a second bottle chamber somewhere deeper. Clark felt it like a second heartbeat. Brainiac wasn't just holding Geneva's survivors. He was preparing more. Maybe for Peter. Maybe for Steve. Maybe for anyone Clark would rush to save. Clark's chest tightened. He forced the feeling down into a single, simple choice. Together. Inside the bottle chamber, Natasha's screen lit with Shuri's translated overlay. Symbols aligned into meanings. Lock, air, pressure. Release sequence. Natasha's voice stayed flat. "I can vent it slowly," she said, "but I need 30 seconds. Steve's voice snapped. "You have it." Outside, Steve pushed Tony into a tighter orbit around the fortress seam. "Stark," Steve said. "Burn the left node." Thor, lightning into the seam when it opens. "Clark, shield the entry." "Peter, get ready to pull people through." Peter's voice squeaked. "Pull people through space. Great. Normal." Strange held the portal open wider, face tense with effort. "My door's ready," he said. "If you deliver them to me, I can send them to safety." Clark positioned himself at the seam where Natasha would release the bottle. He took a hit from a red pulse and stayed there anyway. When the seam cracked, drones rushed in. Clark met them head-on. He didn't swing wildly. He moved with control, smashing only what he had to smash, pushing debris away from the seam, keeping a clean lane. Thor's lightning crashed down into the hull and forced more drones back. Tony fired a wide beam, carving space free like a torch-cutting metal. Inside, Natasha began the release. The bottle shimmered. The tiny figures inside looked up, eyes wide, not understanding. Natasha's hands moved steady and exact. "Come on," she whispered. The bottle opened, not with a loud pop, with a soft slide, like a door unlocking. A wave of air rushed out. Small objects floated, and the people inside drifted free, weightless and terrified, like drowning swimmers suddenly pulled into the sky. Peter shot forward on a tether line and caught the first person by the arm, careful not to yank too hard. "It's okay," Peter said, voice shaking but kind. "I'm Spider-Man. This is weird, but you're okay." Clark caught two more, one under each arm, and pushed them towards Strange's portal. Strange pulled them through with a flick of his hands, sending them down to an Earth-based med team waiting on the other side. More people drifted out. The lane held. Then Brainiac reacted. The fortress hummed. The red pulses synchronized. A single, sharp burst struck Clark, Tony, and Thor at once. Clark felt his strength dip hard, like a sudden shadow crossed the sun. His vision narrowed for half a second. A drone used that half second to slam into the seam and try to close it. Clark snarled under his breath and forced himself forward anyway. He grabbed the drone and ripped it apart, then used his body like a wall in front of the opening. Tony's voice cracked with effort. He's trying to shut the bottle, Steve shouted. Natasha, how many left? Natasha's voice was tight. 7, 6! The walls around her began to move faster. The maze was trying to crush her path back. She didn't panic. She sprinted, eyes tracking exits, using her body like a precise tool. 5! She shouted. Clark held the seam open with sheer force, fighting through the heaviness. Thor roared and slammed lightning into the red pulse emitters on the fortress crown. 2 emitters shattered. The pulse weakened. Clark felt the sun return a fraction. He moved faster, caught the last drifting civilians, and shoved them toward Strange's portal. Peter grabbed the final child and cradled her close to his chest like she was fragile glass. Got you, Peter whispered. Strange pulled them through. The portal flickered. Strange's face went pale. I can't hold much longer, he said. Tony's voice turned sharp. Then we leave, now. Natasha reached the seam from inside, sliding through as the hallway behind her tried to swallow the opening. Clark caught her wrist and pulled her out clean. The seam snapped shut behind them. For a second, it looked like they had won. Then Brainiac spoke again into Clark's mind. Your pattern is confirmed, Brainiac said. You will return. A new bottle core flared deeper inside the fortress, larger than the first. Clark felt it like a threat made of math. He realized in one cold moment that Brainiac didn't need Geneva's survivors forever. He could keep collecting new ones until Clark finally broke. Tony saw Clark's face and understood without words. We got many, Tony said quietly. Not all, but many. Clark's jaw clenched. He wanted to go back in. He wanted to tear the fortress apart and end it now. But he didn't know where every bottle was. He didn't know the rules holding them stable. If he tore the wrong thing, he could kill the people he came to save. That was Brainiac's shield, not armor. Hostages. Steve's voice cut through, firm and clear. We leave, Steve said. We regroup. We build a way to hit him without risking civilians. Clark forced himself to nod. Together. They retreated through Strange's portal as it sputtered and closed behind them. Back on Earth, med teams rushed the rescued civilians into care. Cameras tried to push in, but Steve and Natasha blocked them with sharp looks and tighter security. Tony walked straight to a private room, helmet off, hair damp with sweat. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were alive with angry focus. Shuri's face appeared on a screen. We have data, she said. We learned his bottle frequency. We learned his red pulse pattern. We can build counters. Tony nodded. Good, he said. Because next time, I'm not letting him use my planet's fears as his weapon. Clark stood near a window, watching the sunrise begin to lighten the sky. People had been saved, but not everyone. He felt that like a weight, not as guilt that crushed him, but as duty that kept him moving. Steve stepped beside him. You didn't take the bait, Steve said. Clark's voice was quiet. I wanted to, he admitted. Steve nodded like that was honest and human. Wanting doesn't decide your actions, Steve said. Choosing does. Tony joined them, arms crossed. The Compact Council is going to try paperwork again, Tony said. They always do. Clark glanced at him. And what will you do? Tony smirked, tired. I'm going to hand them a new document, he said. 1 page, big letters. Steve raised an eyebrow. What does it say? Tony looked at Clark when he answered. It says, partnership, not ownership. Clark's chest eased. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, a new status quo settled in. Not comfortable, but real. Clark was not a prisoner. He was not a king. He was a guardian who chose to stay, even when staying hurt. And somewhere far away, in a silent fortress that drifted like a dead moon, Brainiac stored new data and made new bottles, already adjusting for the next encounter. He did not feel anger. He felt certainty. This was only step one, and he had all the time in the universe. Sunrise made the buildings look softer than they really were. Clark sat on the edge of a high roof and watched the light spread across New York. The air was cool. The city was loud in a gentle way. He held a sheet of paper in his hands. Not a form, a letter. He wrote slowly, with care, as if each word had weight. He did not write a long speech. He wrote simple truth. He wrote that he was alive. He wrote that he missed home. He wrote that he was trying to keep another world safe because that was what he knew how to do. He wrote Lois's name and let it sit there on the page like a warm thing. He couldn't send it. There was no mailbox that reached across a sealed universe, so he folded it and put it inside his jacket, close to his heart. A voice came through his comm, light and familiar. "Hey," Peter said. "So, you up?" Clark's mouth twitched. "I'm up," he said. Peter hesitated. "I just wanted to say thanks for yesterday, for not leaving." Clark looked out over the streets. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Peter tried to sound casual. "Cool, because I told that kid we rescued that you're basically, like, a space firefighter." Clark blinked. "A space firefighter?" Peter rushed on, embarrassed. "I mean it in a good way. Like, you show up and you're calm and you save people and—" Clark chuckled, quiet and real. "Thank you, Peter." Peter let out a breath. "Okay. Great. Also, Tony says the council sent another packet." Clark closed his eyes for a second. "Of course they did." Peter's voice brightened. "Tony labeled it Packet 2, Revenge of the Forms." Clark shook his head, smiling despite himself. "Tell him I'm impressed," he said. "Will do," Peter said. "Oh, and there's a small thing. Not alien. Just a bus stuck under a broken sign on 8th Avenue." Clark stood. He didn't rocket off like a weapon. He stepped into the air and rose smoothly, like a person choosing to help. "On my way," Clark said. As he flew, he caught a glimpse of himself in a window reflection. Not a god, not a monster. A man in blue and red, carrying a letter he couldn't send, heading toward a problem he could solve. In a quiet office across the city, Ross watched the news without sound. He saw Superman's silhouette cross the skyline and clenched his jaw. In deep space, Brainiac adjusted a new bottle design, its interior shaped for faster containment and stronger red pulses. And farther still, Thanos turned his gaze toward the same blue planet and smiled, patient as stone. The universe continued. Life continued. But it was different now, because Superman was here. And he had chosen to stay.